and welcome again to Reel, Vision Cable's community access program that lets you know what it is that residents just like you are doing with community access programming. Last month, you'll remember that we introduced you to a broad overview of the types of programs that are produced with Vision Cable Community Access. This month, I'd like to introduce you to one of the people who is making those programs possible. Owen North is our guest this month, and Owen is one of our longest-standing producers in community access, and you'll notice I didn't say you're one of our oldest producers in community access. I knew you'd appreciate that. We've had a lot of people involved, but Owen, your group, the Pinellas County Historical Society, was the very first organization to get involved with us. In fact, you helped Vision Cable create the community access program by serving as our pilot group. How did you get involved in that first stage? We didn't just pick you out of the air. How did you come up with it?
Well, we were, for a long time, associated with, and still are, with the Pinellas County Historical Society. And we worked through the Oral History Committee, and I've been doing oral history work for a number of years. Goes way back to the 50s. But we kind of fell into this with, I think Don Maines was instrumental in getting us started there, and yourself, and then John and the others there. And oral history kind of lends itself, I believe, to this particular medium. And it's been a real fun thing to do, and all of the people that we've had that started with us, except for just a little bit of slippage, have been so well motivated, evidently by yourself and others, that or by themselves, and they just continue to go on this thing. And it's really been a tremendous experience and a real fun thing, and it's not been a pressure thing, which is something I think is important.
Well,
really.
now you have about 14 people who are consistently active with the program. You started out with about 15 or 16 initially, and as you say, a few of them, of course, have dropped back a little bit in their involvement. But have you noticed any differences in, say, the folks who were trained at the very beginning and the things that they are familiar with and the folks who are coming through now? This is about a 2-year-old program, so you've got people who've come through not only at the very beginning, but some of the people who were involved after we finally learned what we were doing and teaching people.
Well, this is quite true. I think we've had to do a lot of more learning on the hands-on learning as we've progressed through the years, but experience is a real good teacher.
Yeah.
And certainly those that are coming through your program at this time, I think, are a little bit better prepared probably than we were when we started off. And I'm still not real sure about the character generator. I'm not.
Well, we like to match up the characters with the character generator.
Well,
so.
Okay, all right, I'll buy that.
The program that you produced, Pinellas Past, has been getting a lot of favorable attention in the community. A couple of times I've been with you at the tapings when people have said, oh, I saw your show last week, and some of your crew people have commented that people are mentioning to them that they've watched the show. What was it that got you started on the particular format? You've got This Day in History, and you've got some interviews, and you've had some interesting kinds of programs. How do you go about selecting them?
It's interesting. People, of course, once you get going with this thing, well, people are going to try to contact you, and they'll show some interest. And for example, Mike Slicker has just done one with Jay Starkey, and we did this was in a little field trip. We went down to his home in St. Petersburg and taped him. And as you know, Starkey is Starkey Road, and Jay Starkey is an old-time cattle person in our area, and he's had some fascinating stories about the beginnings of history. But this is what we're doing. It's an oral history, and we're kind of wearing two hats. And one hat is to be somewhat entertaining, but also we take these tapes and put them into the archives at Heritage Park, and from thence we put them on half-inch, and they are available to the public from Heritage Park, as well as they're being incorporated in the curriculum of the school system.
My goodness, so the half-inch tapes can actually be checked out on a lending library basis?
Yes, right.
That's wonderful. And now, is Vision Cable the only system on which Pinellas Past is seen?
We do take some tapes over to Tampa Cable, and they show our program on, I think it's on a weekly basis there also.
Yeah, that's great. What are some of the things that someone new coming into the program, you as one of our longest standing producers, might like to say to those people?
I think that I think motivation is very important, and that old word responsibility or stick to it, activeness and so forth. I think those things are important. It is a creative medium, and I think everybody's got a little bit of that type of creativity within it. You know, somebody once said that everybody's got a poem locked in their heart, or that someone has a story. Everybody's got a story, and this gives people an opportunity to do some of these things which are self-gratifying.
Well, I'm certainly glad that your group particularly has been involved, because you've been a really shining example of what community access really can be. And in just a couple of minutes, we're going to let folks see some of the most recent shows produced through Pinellas Pass with the Historical Society, so folks can see just what is possible for them. If folks have been looking off into the background here, they can see that the set that we're on is a pretty basic kind of set. And yet the things that you've done up at the Palm Harbor studio with the set that you've created have been really remarkable. So we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the excerpts, not only of Pinellas Past, but of the other programs that have been produced during the month of May in community access right now.
Welcome to Pinellas Past. My name is Connie Mudano, and for this program we're going to be taking a look at the celebration of the National Historic Preservation Week, which this year of 1986 will be held May 11th through May 17th. We're going to take a look at the history also of the National Historic Preservation Act, which celebrates its 20th anniversary this year. Beginning with President Johnson and Lady Bird Johnson in 1966, Congress responded by passing the National Historic Preservation Act. The act expanded the National Register of Historic Places. At that time, only about 800 entries. Today, the National Register lists over 40,000 listings of sites, buildings, and objects in over 1,200 historic districts. The act expanded the National Register and created a system of matching grants to states and the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and authorized a new Federal Advisory Council on Historic Preservation to screen federal projects for threats to historic resources. This was a very momentous occasion, and now this year we are celebrating the anniversary. We're also going to take a look at the celebration locally in St. Petersburg and other areas of Pinellas County. In the meantime, though, we are going to hear from our pioneer editor, Charlie Jones.
Thank you, Connie, and hello to everyone out in TV land. We are glad to bring you some of the events that happened 100 years ago in this good and great land of the United States of America. One of the major topics of discussion in 1886 was the formation of labor unions to help protect the workers who were being mistreated and overworked by greedy management and owners. There was a large amount of labor unrest, resulting in strikes and riots, such as the Haymarket Massacre in Chicago. The newly organized Knights of Labor organized a strike of the railroad workers. It basically failed, but it did help publicize the question of an 8-hour day. Other strikes occurred around the country, even in small industries. A good example was a sandwich glass factory in Sandwich, Massachusetts. When the workers went on strike, the owner gave them a week to return to work, or he would permanently close the factory. The workers called his bluff, and the factory never opened again. However, an improvement came late in the year when the American Federation of Labor was organized in Columbus, Ohio, with Samuel Gompers as its first president. On a lighter note, however, was the subject of the Indian Wars in the West. Although 10 years had passed since Custer's disaster at the Little Bighorn, the Indians still had not been conquered until September 1886, when federal troops under the command of General John Miles captured the great Indian chief Geronimo, thus ending the last great Indian War. Geronimo, incidentally, was imprisoned at Fort Pickens on Santa Rosa Island near the entrance to the Pensacola Harbor. And now back to our lovely host, Connie Madonna.
Thank you, Charlie, and welcome back. Our guest this evening is Jim Golden, who is an architect in St. Petersburg and also president of St. Petersburg Preservation Incorporated. Jim is going to tell us about the activities that will take place in St. Petersburg during Preservation Week. I'm also going to mention some other activities taking place at Heritage Park during the same period. I would like first to read the proclamation or the letter from President Reagan, which declared May 11th through 17th Preservation Week. I want to commend all the states and local communities, as well as the organizations, families, and individuals taking part in National Historic Preservation Week. America's success, the envy of the world, is due not only to our willingness to forge into the future, but also to our respect for the rich treasure house of our past. If we ever start neglecting the achievements of those who have gone before us, if we ever scorn to build on those accomplishments, our future will grow dim, and our present will grow stale. To respect the graciousness of the past, to preserve it, restore it, and keep it fresh is the splendid aim of National Historic Preservation Week. I heartily endorse your work. It is something we all have a stake in. During the 2 decades since passage of the National Historic Preservation Act, Americans everywhere have become more keenly aware of just how much historic places contribute to the pleasantness and prosperity of our cities, towns, and rural areas. Historic places are ever-present reminders of those who built our great country. They also remind us that this country was built on the bedrock of faith, family, and hard work. I congratulate the National Trust for Historic Preservation on its splendid program and urge all Americans to join in celebrating and working to preserve and enhance our historic places the week of May 11th. Signed, President Ronald Reagan. That certainly gives us an incentive to go on with historic preservation. And we would like to tell you some of the things that are being done in this area. And I'd like to welcome Jim Golden. Nice to see you again, Jim. We've done a program before. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to another trip into Pinellas Past. For the next few minutes, I'm going to be leading you on another journey as we explore our rich Pinellas heritage. Our emphasis during this show is going to be on education, especially as it relates to the Curlew Elementary School building. That building has vanished, but the memories that have occurred there certainly have not. And tonight we're going to have 2 guests that will share some of their memories with us. First will be Miss Eloise Thompson, who was a student, a teacher, and a principal at Curlew Elementary. And then we will have Charlie Jones, who was born within a very short distance of the school where he was to begin his education. He still lives in the area and has his business here. As you listen to these people reminisce about this school, I know that you will enjoy it, but I hope you will also be a little bit surprised. As I talked to them before the show, I realized that there really has not been that much difference between our educational systems, past and present. We'll be with our guests in just a few moments, but first, we will have a very brief history of Palm Harbor from our pioneer editor.
Thank you. The community of Palm Harbor is over 100 years old. The census of 1860 was the first to list the settlers in the area. Families remaining in the area today from those who were first listed include the Tenneys, Whiters, Hollands, Suttons, and Thompsons. Those pioneer families depended to a large extent on their own resourcefulness for their food, lodging, and clothing. The Thompson family, headed by William Lawrence, planted extensive orange groves east of the present-day US 19. He also brought the first sugarcane mill to Palm Harbor. The other families also planted citrus or commercially fished the extremely bountiful waters of the bays and Gulf. One of the oldest churches in Pinellas County was constructed on land donated by an early settler, Mr. John A. Sutton. He, in turn, was given the right to name the church. He chose the name Curlew Methodist. Family members elate for the beautiful pink curlew birds which nested along Curlew Creek. That original church is still in use today, although a new sanctuary was built on this site a few years ago. The Sutton families continued to be active in the church. Early development as a residential community began with J.C. Craver when he came to the area in search of regaining his health. He applied and was given a post office commission. In 1888, he built a general store in the present downtown area of Old Palm Harbor. Other development had also begun to grow around this store and post office. Dreams for a winter resort area began in 1886 with a group from Omaha, Nebraska, the Southern Land and Improvement Company. They constructed a large hotel east of the present Old Palm Harbor and a beach pavilion near the present-day Stansel Park. A horse-drawn car transported the populace between the two. To gain financial support for the project, the group changed the company name to Sutherland Land and Improvement Company to honor the rich Duke of Sutherland who had built a home on Lake Butler, now called Lake Tarpon. Under the new name and with adequate financial backing, the area was platted in 1888, becoming one of the first developments in Florida to be platted. The hotel did not flourish as expected. In 1902, the Florida Methodist Conference bought it and moved Westland Institute here, renaming it Florida Seminary. Extensive expansion occurred at the college in the next few years. However, in 1921, the old hotel building, which had become the women's dormitory and administration building, was destroyed by fire. The college was eventually moved to Lakeland and became the present-day Florida Southern College. The brick from the burned college building was cleaned and used by a group of Methodists to construct the Palm Harbor Methodist Church, which still stands today. A new sanctuary was built in 1972, and the original structure became the home of the Palm Harbor Library. Throughout the early years, the citrus and fishing industries continued to flourish. Other development companies began developing various residential areas. However, the loss of the college, followed by the Depression years, brought a halt to the growth. It was not until the 1950s that Palm Harbor was rediscovered. Since that time, the large unincorporated area of Palm Harbor has become one of the fastest growing residential areas in the nation, and we might add one of the most beautiful. And now back to you, Winona.
Okay, now we're back to Pinellas Past with our first guest of the evening, Miss Eloise Thompson. And we're certainly pleased to have you with us tonight, Miss Thompson.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And talking to Miss Thompson before the show, I discovered that she was a teacher at Curlew Elementary School that we're going to be discussing for the next few minutes, but she was also a student there. So we want to learn a lot about the school, both from her as a student and the teacher. But first of all, let's get the location of this school settled. Just where was the school located?
The school was located on the west side of Westlake Road, north of the packing house on 584.
Okay, that's good. But the school, the building is no longer there, correct?
No, it was burned several years ago.
Okay. Well, let's go way back. Since you were a student there, could you tell us just when the school actually opened?
Well, this was the third building that had been built for Curlew Elementary School, and it was finished in 1916. So I was a student there in 1916-17, in the third and fourth. I was in the third grade.
But that was when that school actually
That's when
opened.
that one was opened,
1916. And then it only had the 4 grades.
No, at that time it had all 8 grades.
Oh.
It had the first and second grade in one room, and the third and fourth, and then the 5th through the 8th grades were in the upstairs room.
So it was a 2-story building.
2-story brick building, yes.
Could you describe the building a little bit for us?
Well, as you entered the front door, there were a double stairway going upstairs, and then, of course, a long hallway through the building with one classroom on each side. The upper stairs part was also divided with movable doors so that it could be used as 2 classrooms, but as most of the time it was just one.
But the 3rd and 4th, no, the
Fourth,
older
5th, and
grades.
6th, well, 5th through the 8th grade were up in the upper story.
Oh, very good. Then you came back as a teacher.
Yes.
When did that occur?
Well, that was in 1929. And during the time between the time I was there, back in the mid-20s, they had closed both schools in that area, Ozona and Palm Harbor, Sutherland at that time. And all of the children were in that new building they built for Palm Harbor School. And then in 29, they took the first 4 grades back to Ozona and to Curlew, and I went there as a teacher in the 1st and 2nd grade.
So at that time, there was only the 4 grades.
4 grades, yes.
Okay, and how many teachers did they
Well,
have?
there were
One?
just the 2, the
Just-
teaching principal and 1 teacher. I was the 1st and 2nd, and then Mrs. Whetstone was the 3rd and 4th grade teacher at that time.
But she also served as a principal.
Oh, yes. And they called it a teaching principal.
Oh, and that was the total staff. Did you
That
have
was
any
it.
other?
No.
What about cafeteria? or
No
lunch?
cafeteria, no janitor. We did our own janitor work.
Oh, my goodness. That's a little different from today, isn't it?
Yes.
So I assume everybody brought lunches in, or did
Well,
they
yes.
go home?
No, they brought lunches.
Okay.
We sat in the classroom and ate lunch and then went out for the playground.
Oh, okay. How about the children? How did they get to school? Did they all walk, or?
No, the bus that served the area would pick up the elementary children along with the junior high and senior high and drop them off at our school. And those, of course, weren't on the bus route, had to walk or provide their own transportation.
And today, I believe it's 2 miles from the school. Was it the same?
It was the same then, yes.
Same then. So anywhere 2 miles, then they would walk. Could you tell us a little bit about how the students dressed in those days and that type of thing?
Well, they just wore the same clothes they wear. They had the overalls, dungarees, shirts and jackets.
Were they allowed? Well, they did. Did the girls wear shorts? In
Oh,
those
no,
days?
no. Girls had dresses all the time.
What about shoes?
Well, if they came barefooted, they could.
Because that was, well, in 29, that was right during the Depression.
Yes.
And I assume a lot of them perhaps didn't have shoes to wear every day.
Well, if they didn't have them, why? They were provided for.
All right. So most of the students there came from a local
Yes.
area.
At one time, the children from Crystal Beach and Wall Springs area was brought out there
So that
when
was
they
quite a
closed that
distance.
school.
We had some busing back then also, didn't we? All right. What other positions did you ever hold?
Oh, well, I was teacher and then in 37 I became the principal because the principal who was there transferred somewhere to another county.
So then you became
I
principal.
was principal there for 13 years until it was closed
But
in 1950.
were you a teaching principal also?
Oh, yes. I was always a teaching principal there.
So there was still only the two of you?
Yes. Well, at that time, we did have a cafeteria, and we did have a secretary, and we had a custodian.
So you were getting a little bit
Oh,
of help.
yes.
What about the supplies and so forth for the school? Did you have to provide any of those, or
Well,
did the students provide?
The first few years, why, the children would pay, I forgot an amount, a little bit of money, and we'd buy art supplies and things like that. And then later on, the county started providing things. Of course, the books were provided too.
Did you ever have any real interesting stories about getting materials and so forth?
Well, yes, I guess we did, because one time the children were out in the yard in the early morning, and I was in the room, and they started yelling, "A snake!" So I went out and I found this little dead dog kennel, and it was a coral snake, and I hit it on its head until it was killed, and we took it in and got $2. At that time, they were paying $2 a bounty, I guess you'd call it, for rattlesnakes and coral snakes.
Oh, my goodness. So that's how you raise money for the school.
Well, the PTA is one that really got the money, but that was what we did.
Well, every little bit helps,
Oh,
doesn't
yes.
it? But you did have a PTA. And
Oh,
it
yes,
was
a very
active.
active PTA and very helpful.
What about the parents' involvement with the school? Did you have a lot of support from the parents?
Yes, that we had very good support from all the parents.
What about discipline?
Well, the parents were right back of a teacher in the discipline, because one parent brought the child to school and said, "Now, if he doesn't behave, you punish him and he'll get it when he gets home."
And that was a regular...
He behaved himself, too. No, we had very little discipline problem.
Oh, that was good, too. What about, you said that the school board furnished the books and so forth. What about libraries?
Well, we had very few library books, and that's what the PTA and different ones would donate books. And at the end, we had a fairly good library for that small group.
But you had to really work to get the materials in there, and I suppose that was all books. Today we have all kinds of films and film strips, but you didn't have those in those days, did you?
No, but before I went teaching there, when they had the 8th grades, they had, I can't remember what they would call it, but where they showed pictures. It was one of those old type of machines that they had. I never used it because they didn't know how to use that one, but they had that, but it was stored underneath.
Well, how about, you've talked about the discipline and so forth. When the students were studying then, did they help each other, or did they depend entirely on you? If you only had the 2 classes, you must have had to make arrangements for the other class to be studying while you were teaching.
We had to make plans for them to do some work, either reading library books or writing or drawing or something to keep them busy. They were very nice about it, though. They could move around and
But you didn't have the older students actually come in and help the others?
No, if the child needed a little extra help, maybe one of their friends would help them with the word study and things like that.
Now, you said you were there for 13 years?
As a principal.
As a principal. And then they closed the school at
in
that time.
1950.
All right. Did the school belong to the school system, or what was the arrangement?
Well, I understand that there was an agreement that the land would revert back to the former owner if it was not used as a school.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, it went back, I suppose, to the
owner, yes.
owner. Where did you go? Did you quit teaching?
No,
there?
I hadn't taught enough to retire at that time, so I went to Dunedin Elementary and was there for 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I retired for 3 years, and then I went back to teaching in Sunset Hills and Tarpon Springs for 8 more years.
Oh, my goodness.
And I finally retired in 1970.
Okay. Just very quickly, what about the playground and so forth? What kind of games did the young people play?
We had a nice playground. They had a merry-go-round and swings and some other equipment like that that he could play on. And then we had a lovely field out in the back. The boys played softball, and of course they had a lot of places to run.
So you,
Oh, yes.
you had plenty of places,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess the young people had to bring their own play equipment if they
Well,
were
the
going to play ball.
PTA helped with that. And we had some equipment there at the school.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was very good then. Well, I believe our time is just about out. We certainly want to thank you for coming and sharing all of this about Curlew Elementary School.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thompson.
And
Hi, my name is Dave Perkins. I'm treasurer of the Florida Historical Society. And I'd like to tell you about our annual fish fry. It's going to occur this year on March the 30th, and it'll be continuous from 11 in the morning until 7 in the evening. We expect to not only have a good fish fry, but also have booths for antiques and crafts. And last year, our fish fry was in August. Everybody had such a good time, and they've been asking us to put it on again. This will be at the location of the Plum House, which is on South Greenwood at 1380, between the Ross Norton Park and the Ed Wright Park on beautiful Bel Air Lake. And we'd like to invite you to come down. The price is $4, and this will help restore the Plum House in a way in which we'll all be proud of. Thank you.
Let's don't forget our fish fry at the Plum House on March the 30th from 11 in the morning to 7 at night. And it's because of this that we can present programs such as this. So be sure and come to the fish fry. And now we do have our second guest of the evening, Mr. Charlie Jones, who was a student of Ms. Thompson's when he was in school. So Charlie, it's glad to have you here tonight. We're correct. Did you go to Curlew Elementary for your entire 4 grades?
I sure did. I attended Curlew Elementary School in the early 30s, and I went to school for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades, entire that section.
Okay, that's interesting. And to have had Ms. Thompson, who's just been telling us a little about the school there. She's told us a little bit about the classes and so forth. Do you remember how many students usually were in your grade? I assume that it was about the same each year, but how many did you have?
Well, in my grade, there was usually about 15 students. I think there were about 15 students in each one of the grades, and probably all 4 grades composed of around 60 students, more or less.
Okay. How about the teachers? Now, Ms. Thompson had said that she taught 1st and 2nd grade. Was that still the way it was when you were a student there?
That's correct. Miss Thompson was my 1st grade teacher. She also taught me in the 2nd grade.
But you had another teacher then for the 3rd and 4th
For the 3rd and 4th grade, I had Mrs. Cleo B. Carter. She was a principal at that time, before Ms. Eloise Thompson was principal.
So Ms. Thompson was never principal while you were there?
Well, I were there, but she became principal the next year after.
Okay. And she was also talking about the fact that a lot of the students were bused if they lived too far from the school. I believe she said 1.5 miles. How about you? Did you live close enough to ride or to walk, or did you have to ride the bus?
Well, at first, when we lived out on Nebraska Avenue in Palm Harbor, that was about a 1600 area out there. Why, we rode the bus because it was over the mile-and-a-half limit, but later on my dad bought a small farm out in Curlew, and therefore we was under the mile-and-a-half limit, so we had to walk to school from there.
Okay, so what happened when it was raining or freezing like we've had this past winter? Did you have any transportation, or did you still have to walk?
Well, sometimes the neighbors or maybe some of the people around would take us to school. Usually my father, he had to go to work early, and at the time we had the cars, well, he was usually gone at the time, and we had some good neighbors, which were Mr. Bert Sutton. Bert Sutton was in county commissioner, and his family had 2 cars, and that was a great help to us because they'd pick us up and carry us to school.
Well, that was a good help. She also talked about the discipline in the school and the fact that they had quite a bit of parental support during those years. What do you remember about that as a student?
Well, I remember the discipline was I'd say very good to the basic things we were taught, not to lie and not to steal, and that was really emphasized there. And of course, that we'd have different things that would happen. We'd have the Christmas plays and so forth and so on, and really the people really got into schoolwork, and we had PTA meetings and so forth, and really it was the same idea carried right to this day from the PTA and the different organizations. Also, we had the home demonstration club there, which they came out, the women of the community came out and did a lot of cooking and canning and everything. It was a little building right adjacent to the school.
So you were able to see that and have conversations and such with those people?
That's right. They were very interested. The community, they all worked together, or had to, because it was in the middle of the 30s, and times were really hard, and people helped one another a whole lot.
I see, yeah. You talked about special events and celebrations and so forth. Could you tell us a little bit about what kind you did have? I'm sure you had something for Christmas perhaps, or Easter, but did you have those, or what other types of celebrations?
Well, the main thing we had, of course, was a Christmas program, and at that time we exchanged names, probably just like they do today, and each one brought some kind of small gift, and I think the allowance you had to make this gift was not over 25 cents. And that was very, very helpful to us, and we had a Christmas tree, and we had the little auditorium upstairs there, and it really went over in a big way. And the next thing of interest was, of course, to end the school. At that time, we tried to have a real big picnic where the families would get together with the children, would probably go over to Clearwater Beach. In fact, that's the first time I ever went to Clearwater Beach, when I was on the school picnic.
But that was families, it wasn't just the students.
It was families and the students, because there had to be some families had to carry the students over there. There wasn't any bus.
You didn't have a school bus.
They didn't have a school bus to go on that particular outing.
Oh, that's interesting, because today is mostly by bus. What about the dress of the students? Could you tell us a little bit about how you dressed back then?
Sure. The dress code was a little bit different then. Of course, like I said before, it was in the middle of the 30s and the early part of the 30s, and the girls, you never saw them wearing shorts or slacks. They always had dresses, and they were pretty long in compared to what they wear today. And the boys, lots of them would wear overalls and dungarees and blue jeans, the same as they do today, but there was a very, very simple mode of dress. And of course, we lived in the community where most of the children went barefooted at that time. We just on the cold days, you're allowed to have shoes.
Well, that's interesting, because today we can't go unless we do have shoes on, so that's something a little different. What about the facilities, drinking fountains and restrooms and things of that sort?
Well, the facilities of school, of course, we've improved now a great deal on that. The school I attended in the first, second, third, and fourth grade, we had, first of all, the interior of the classrooms, they were more or less pine ceiling, and then we had a stove in the corner of the building which heated the room for us. And every morning, if it was real cold, the teacher would have us go out and get enough wood for that day, and then she'd start the fire. And sometimes some of the fourth graders, we thought we was really big, we'd slip an extra bunch of wood in the stove, and it would get to jumping up and down, and you could smell the varnish burning on the side of the wall, but we never had any fires in that respect. And at that time, we did have water facilities there, but they were out of the school building. The commodes were outside the buildings. You had to walk about 100 feet to get there to the buildings there, and if it was raining or something, you just had to have an umbrella or put a baseboard box or something over your head to keep from getting wet. And the drinking fountains, I don't remember of any lavatories being in the toilet section of the facility, but on the outside, while we'd have regular faucets, and I think there was some little fountains that stuck on top of the faucets that we were able to get our water to drink and wash our hands. That's the way I remember it.
We just have about 1 minute left, so could you compare? I know that you went to school there, and now you've had your children go through the Pinellas County schools also. Could you just very quickly compare their education to yours?
Well, I'd say they have a better chance now because of the facilities. I don't believe the teachers were any better. I think the love and compassion for the students was just as great those days as they are now. And I hope that the schools continue to grow in growth and knowledge.
Okay. Well, I think that's about it for tonight. Thank you very much. We've had another trip down the Pinellas past, exploring Pinellas heritage.